He took punches from the hardest hitters in boxing history. He stood against the United States government and refused to break. He told the world he was the greatest, and then he proved it. But on one unforgettable night, something happened that no opponent could ever do. Muhammad Ali collapsed, not in a boxing ring, not from a punch. On a television stage in front of 30 million viewers. From a single question, the man who asked it, Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show, was supposed to be entertainment. Laughs, stories, maybe some of Ali's famous poems and predictions. That's what everyone expected. That's what the audience came to see. But Johnny Carson had other plans. He had written one question on his card. Just 7 words. 7 words that would cut through decades of armor. 7 words that would expose a secret Ali had buried since childhood. When Ali heard that question, his famous smile disappeared, his voice stopped working. His eyes filled with something no one had ever seen in them before. Tears. The most confident man on the planet began to shake. And then, right there on national television, the greatest broke down completely. The audience didn't know what to do. The cameras kept rolling. And Johnny Carson did something he had never done in 30 years of hosting. He stood up, walked around his desk, and held Muhammad Ali while he wept. If you want to know what question broke the unbreakable, what secret Ali had been hiding from the world, and what Johnny Carson confessed that turned this interview into one of the most powerful moments in television history, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to witness isn't just a story. It's a lesson about fathers, sons, and the courage it takes to finally be real. The curtain opened, Muhammad Ali stepped into the light. The Tonight Show audience didn't just applaud, they exploded. People jumped to their feet before he even reached the chair. This wasn't a guest arriving. This was a king entering his court. Ali moved across that stage like he owned it. Shoulders loose, eyes bright, that famous half-smile playing on his lips. He threw a few shadow punches at the air, and the crowd roared even louder. Johnny Carson stood to greet him. That was rare. Carson had interviewed presidents, movie stars, and legends of every kind. He almost never stood. But for Ali, he made an exception. They shook hands. Carson held the grip an extra moment, looking at Ali like he was looking at a force of nature. And he was. This was the man who shocked the world by defeating Sonny Liston when nobody gave him a chance. The man who changed his name from Cassius Clay and demanded the world respect it. The man who refused to fight in Vietnam, even when they took everything from him. His title, his license, his right to earn a living. 3.5 years of his prime gun, they called him a traitor, a coward, a criminal. He called himself free. And when he finally returned to boxing, he didn't just come back, he conquered. The rumble in the jungle against George Foreman. The thriller in Manila against Joe Frazier. Fights that would be remembered for centuries. Carson knew all of this. He had watched Ali's entire journey, but tonight, Carson wasn't interested in the highlight reel. His producers had prepared the usual questions career moments. Upcoming fights, funny stories. Carson had looked at that list and crossed everything out. He wrote one question at the bottom of his card, circled it twice. His producer noticed and asked what he was planning. Carson just smiled. Tonight, I'm going to find out who he really is. Ali settled into the guest chair. Immediately, the performance began. Voices, impressions, poems. I'm so fast I could turn off the light and be in bed before the room gets dark. The audience howled. Carson laughed along, but his eyes never stopped watching, waiting. He knew that behind all that confidence, behind all that showmanship, there was something else. Something Ali had never shown anyone for 15 minutes. The greatest gave the performance of a lifetime. The crowd was hypnotized. Carson was patient. And then, in a single breath between jokes, everything changed. Carson leaned forward. His expression shifted. Muhammad, seriously, the laughter stopped. The real interview was about to begin. Ali's rhythm broke just for a moment, but Carson caught it. I want to ask you something real, Carson said. His voice was softer now, more personal. When they took everything from you, the title, the right to fight when the whole country turned against you, what was the hardest part? Ali had answered this question 100 times before, in press conferences, in interviews. The answer was always the same. He stood for his beliefs. He would do it again. End of story. But something about the way Carson asked it, the way he waited, the way the silence stretched. Ali didn't give the usual answer. The hardest part, he said slowly, wasn't losing the title. His voice was different now, quieter, heavier. It was watching my mother cry. The audience went completely still. She didn't understand, Ali continued. She kept asking me why I couldn't just go along. Just say the words. Just do what they wanted. She watched her son become the most hated man in America. And she didn't understand why. Carson nodded gently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fill the space. And your father? He asked quietly. Something flickered in Ali's eyes. Something old, something he usually kept buried. My father, Ali repeated. The words seemed to cost him something. My father was a complicated man. Johnny, he paused. The audience held their breath. He painted signs in Louisville. Beautiful signs. But he had bigger dreams. He wanted to be a real artist, wanted his work in galleries. But the world kept telling him no. A black man in Kentucky, in those days dreams like that weren't allowed. Ali looked down at his hands. The same hands that had defeated the most dangerous men alive. So he drank, Ali said. And when he drank, he got angry. He didn't need to say more. The silence said everything. I've never talked about this, Ali continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Not really, but Johnny, I need you to understand something. He looked up. I became a fighter because I was terrified of being weak. Carson listened without moving. Every man I ever faced in that ring, every opponent part of me wasn't fighting them. Ali's eyes were wet now. I was fighting to prove to a little boy in Louisville that he mattered, that he could be somebody, that he wasn't worthless. His voice cracked on that last word. I spent my whole life trying to become the greatest, but you want to know the truth? He pressed his hand against his chest. Inside here, I was still that scared little kid, still trying to prove I was enough, still trying to make my father see me. The weight of those words settled over the studio like a blanket. Nobody moved, nobody whispered. They were witnessing something sacred. Carson had broken through. He had reached the real Muhammad Ali, the one behind the poems, behind the predictions, behind the legend, but he wasn't done, because Carson knew there was something even deeper. A question Ali had never answered, a wound that had never healed, and in the next few moments, he was going to reach it. The studio felt different now. The laughter from earlier belonged to a different show. A different night. What was happening now was something else entirely. Something raw, something real. Carson looked at Ali with an expression few people ever saw from him. Not the talk show host, not the comedian, the man. He took a slow breath. Muhammad, he said softly, I want to ask you something. And I need you to really hear it. Ali nodded. His guard was down now. The performer had stepped aside. If you could say one thing to your father right now, one thing you never got to say while he was alive, what would it be? 7 words. That was all it took. The studio went absolutely silent. Not television silent, real silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. Ali's face changed. The champion vanished. The showman vanished. The man who had stared down Sonny Liston without blinking. The man who had told the United States government to do its worst. All of it gone. What remained was a boy from Louisville who never heard the words he needed to hear. Ali opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. His bottom lip began to tremble. His eyes, those fierce eyes that had intimidated every opponent he ever faced, filled with tears. One escaped down his cheek, then another. His shoulders began to shake. Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time, was sobbing on national television. The audience didn't move. Some covered their mouths, some cried with him. Nobody looked away. They couldn't. Carson didn't speak. He didn't reach for tissues. He didn't try to lighten the moment. He understood that this was holy ground. Finally, after what felt like forever, Ali whispered something so quiet the microphones barely caught it. I would tell him I forgive him. The words fell like stones into still water. I forgive him for not being there. I forgive him for the drinking. I forgive him for the nights I hid in my room. I forgive him for all of it. Tears streamed freely down his face now. No shame, no attempt to hide them, and I would tell him, his voice shattered. I would tell him that everything I ever did, every fight, every title, every time I told the world I was the greatest, he pressed his fist against his heart. I was just a little boy screaming, Daddy, look at me. Daddy, are you proud of me yet? The audience gasped. Some wept openly. But he died, Ali continued, before I could ever ask him. Before I could ever know for sure, his hands covered his face. His body shook with decades of buried grief. The whole world called me the greatest. Johnny. But I never knew if my own father believed it. He couldn't continue. The sentence hung there, incomplete and devastating. Johnny Carson did something he almost never did on television. He stood up, walked around his desk, and sat down right next to Muhammad Ali. Not as a host, as a man. He put his hand on Ali's shoulder. "Firm, steady, present, Muhammad," he said quietly. "Can I tell you something?" Ali looked up, face wet, eyes red, broken open. He knew. Ali blinked. "What?" "Your father knew," Carson repeated. "Every father knows when his son becomes something extraordinary. He watched you become the most famous man on earth. He knew, Muhammad. He just didn't have the words to say it." Ali stared at him, searching for truth in Carson's eyes. "How do you know that?" Carson's expression shifted. Something vulnerable crossed his face, something he had hidden for decades. "Because I know what it's like to carry that same question," he said. "And I need to tell you something I've never told anyone." The studio was frozen. 30 million viewers sat motionless in their living rooms. "My father," Carson began, and his voice wavered. "Johnny Carson. The man who had made America laugh for 3 decades. His voice wavered. "My father never told me he loved me. Not once. Not a single time in my entire life." The words landed like thunder. He was a cold man, distant, critical. "Nothing I ever did was good enough. Not my grades, not my achievements. Not anything." Ali stared at him, recognition flooding his face. "I spent my entire career," Carson continued, "trying to make strangers laugh. Trying to make millions of people love me every single night, because I thought maybe." He paused. His eyes glistened. "Maybe if enough people loved me, it would fill the hole my father left behind." Ali let out a sound, part disbelief, part understanding. "You became the greatest," Carson said softly. "I became the king of late night. And both of us were just little boys looking for our fathers to say we were enough." Ali shook his head slowly. "Johnny, I had no idea. Nobody did," Carson replied. "That's the magic trick, isn't it? We perform so well that nobody sees the wound underneath." The audience was absolutely silent. They were witnessing something too intimate for television, too real for entertainment. "Why?" Ali asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why did you ask me that question tonight? Why me?" Carson smiled, sad and knowing. "Because I recognized you, Muhammad. From the very first time you sat in that chair, all that bravado, all that confidence, all those poems and predictions." He tapped his own chest. "I recognized the armor because I wear the same kind." Ali reached out and grabbed Carson's hand, held it tight. "You just told 30 million people your deepest secret," Ali said. "So did you. What do we do now?" Carson looked at him, really looked at him. 2 men who had spent their whole lives performing, finally seeing each other without the masks. "We stop pretending," Carson said. "We stop running. We let people see that the greatest and the king of late night are just men. Broken men trying to heal." Ali laughed through his tears. "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard." Carson grinned. "Maybe, but it might be the truest thing either of us has ever done." Ali sat up straighter. Something had shifted inside him. The tears had washed something away. Not the pain itself, but the shame of carrying it. The loneliness of hiding it. "Johnny," he said, "can I tell you what I just realized?" Carson nodded. "I've been fighting my whole life. In the ring, outside the ring, fighting racism, fighting the government, fighting my own demons. Always fighting." He paused. "Let the weight of those words settle. But tonight, you taught me something." "What's that?" "The hardest fight isn't against any opponent. It's against the lies you tell yourself about who you are." The words landed clean, powerful, true. I told the world I was the greatest. But underneath that, I was telling myself I wasn't enough. That I had to keep proving, keep winning, keep performing, just to deserve being alive. He looked out at the audience now. These strangers who had just watched him fall apart. "Pain," he said, his voice stronger now, almost prophetic. "Pain is not the enemy." The crowd leaned in. "Pain is the teacher. Pain is what breaks you open so something better can grow." He shook his head. "I lost 3 years of my career. They took my title, my money, my reputation. I thought it would destroy me." He smiled, the first genuine smile since his collapse. "But it made me. It taught me what really matters. Not titles, not trophies, not what the world thinks of you. What matters?" Carson asked. "Truth, connection, being seen for who you really are, not who you pretend to be." He gestured between himself and Carson. Like this moment, right here, right now. This is what matters. Carson's eyes glistened. You really believe that? After everything you've been through? I know it, Ali said firmly, because I spent 40 years running from my pain, building walls, putting on masks, and tonight I finally stopped running. What did you find? Ali placed his hand over his heart. Peace, Johnny, for the first time in my life. Peace. Ali rose slowly from his chair. Carson stood with him. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two men who had spent their lives building legends, now standing in the ruins of their own walls, finally free. Ali opened his arms. Carson stepped forward without hesitation. They embraced, not the quick, polite hug of television guests, a real embrace, the kind that says everything words cannot. Ali's arms wrapped around Carson completely. Two wounded boys who finally found someone who understood. The audience rose to their feet slowly, reverently. Nobody clapped, not yet. Applause would have broken something sacred. When they finally separated, Ali held Carson at arm's length, looking at him with profound gratitude. Johnny, he said, loud enough for every microphone, you asked me the question nobody else had the courage to ask. And you gave me something nobody else could give. What's that? Permission, Ali said. Permission to be human, permission to be broken. Permission to stop being the greatest and just be Muhammad. He turned to the audience. These strangers who had witnessed his soul. That's all any of us really want, isn't it? Permission to be real. Carson faced the camera, tears still drying on his face. In 30 years of doing this show, he said, I have never experienced a night like tonight. He looked at Ali. This man walked in as a champion. He's walking out as a teacher. Ali shook his head. No, Johnny. We're walking out as brothers. The audience finally released, standing ovation, tears flowing freely. Some held complete strangers. The band didn't play. Nobody wanted to break the spell that night. 30 million people watched Muhammad Ali collapse. But what they really witnessed was two men choosing truth over performance, choosing connection over image, choosing to be human. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because tonight, we all learned the same lesson. You don't have to be the greatest to be enough. Subscribe for more powerful true stories that will change how you see the world. The truth is always worth telling.